Hello students, welcome to week 7 for COM 405 Rhetorical Criticism. This week we will be discussing the medium in which we communicate from and disseminate messages from as a mode of transmission and as a mode of analysis within the course. So if you look at the week 7 agenda, you'll see that we're reading through chapter 13. Chapter 13 looks at understanding the medium of transmission and understanding how this relates to rhetorical critiques and criticisms and how we analyze things from a communication perspective rhetorically. You're also watching 2 videos on the rhetorical situation as well as watching a video on academic writing for critical thinking and rhetorical functions. Those videos are both tied directly to your written rhetorical analysis. Within that, you can see in the written rhetorical analysis that is due on Sunday, you also have a weekly review number 7 due on Sunday as well. So we are heavy the next couple weeks on our assignments, so please keep that in mind. Additionally, as you're going through week 7, keep in mind that in week 8 there are modified deadlines for the week 8 assignments, so it's very important that you look at that ahead of time. With the course ending date and the modified assignment, there is very little wiggle room to submit assignments on typical deadlines we've seen throughout the semester, which is either Friday or Sunday. So you do need to keep in mind that the week 8 deadlines are not they're not suggestions, they are firm deadlines, and so you will need to keep that because the course ends at a different pace in week 8 than in most other weeks. So keep that in mind as well. Additionally, in week 7, we are working on our week 7 weekly review. The weekly review is asking you to examine how a current event, something that's reported through media, is treated by your local newspaper versus a local TV or radio station. So you're only picking one event, and within this event, you're going to provide at least 3 examples of this current event, preferably from TV, radio, or newspaper, or web posting, or something of that nature, to then provide a descriptive analysis. What you'll be doing is writing a brief analytical essay tracking this coverage and looking at the differences in coverage across the particular platforms that the event is covered on. So you'll be noticing the differences between how it's reported maybe in the newspaper, on an evening news broadcast, on radio, and things of that nature, or printed out through various different social media outlets and things. So your entire response should be 450 words, not 750 words as posted here. So do notate that. It should be no more than 400, it should be no less than 450 words. That is noted in Blackboard. If you have any additional questions or concerns, please contact me. Additionally, you do need to write your written rhetorical analysis. So a couple of weeks ago, and I am getting through almost all of your oral rhetorical analyses projects, but you did your oral rhetorical analysis, a video presentation of you rhetorically analyzing your artifact. This week we are presenting that via written forms, meaning we're writing an essay. And the reason why we did the video one first was to give you a chance to present this not just verbally, but also in a way where you have to think on your feet and you're coming up with words to help you to construct a formal argument that you can now use in your written analysis. So this formal paper is 700 to 1,000 words. You'll be rhetorically analyzing your artifact that you used in the oral rhetorical analysis and utilize your outline we created last week as well as the outline below to help you do this. So this needs to be in full APA with a cover page, abstract, running headers, references, things of that nature, as well as proper citations and such. Where you provide a clear introduction with thesis statement. You also have a clear summary of the rhetorical situation. You also have a summary of the argument's appeals using ethos, logos, and pathos, as well as a summary of the argument's how the argument negotiates opposing views, as well as the argument's strengths and weaknesses. Points 2, actually every point in this outline is something that you did in the oral rhetorical analysis. Now you actually have to write it. So you'll see that as you go through this project, there's a significant difference from writing your rhetorical analysis and orally presenting it. So hopefully you can use the information you learned from your oral rhetorical analysis to now write your rhetorical analysis and come up with the information that you're utilizing that in a different format. You'll see the process is quite different. To recap some things that are important from the text as well as what we're working through in our theme this week, it's important to know that rhetoric is powerful. That is actually part of one of the P's of rhetoric that's been going on throughout the course text, is the powerful nature of rhetoric is what we're focusing on this week related to media. So it's important to know that it's referred to as being powerful because rhetoric can help and harm in many different ways, especially in its relationship when it's disseminated through media. So the use of mass media as a medium, meaning a way to send out communication for rhetoric, ends up being a double-edged sword. This is because media creates many paradoxes for the use of rhetoric. Media in itself is a double-edged sword. It provides the dissemination of large amounts of information in a single moment, almost instantaneously to a consumer, but does not allow proper time for them to process, critically think, and discern the message to determine if this message is accurate, truthful, or if it's deceptive in its persuasive nature. So with that, that can create a troubling scenario when we are rhetorically analyzing something or we're presenting something in a rhetorical format. The communication we use persuasively can be construed as not unethical, but may not allow time for processing and critical thinking and discernment because of the quick-natured feel of mass media. It's also important to know that mass media does work positively for us because it provides a global village, and it also gives us the chance to see that there's a need to analyze the medium we are using to receive information from. What I mean by this is that the global nature of media brings together many different countries and cultures and things of that nature in one format. So if we have television, we are all joined together through this medium to watch this news broadcast. It creates a village in a global setting. Additionally, if we start to analyze the mediums that we are using within media to send information out, we can look at how we're sending this information through different communication technologies and what that means with how we receive information and what that means to our rhetorical messages by sending something out on Facebook or Instagram versus sending it out through television or a film or whatever it may be. So looking at our media sources is definitely a way to analyze how this information is being received in a powerful format. To do this, the text talks a lot about the medium as the message. So I'm going to provide you with some information about Marshall McLuhan, who is the originator behind the medium as the message. He is also he is also referred to as one of the greatest mass communication theorists of the time, within history. And it's important to know that he first started off as a literary analysis and scholar within English before moving towards a career in mass communication. In fact, he said communication technology was just a hobby of his, and he was actually trained and worked and with scholarly information in nature within the area of literary analysis. That's why sometimes there's some confusion between is Marshall McLuhan a rhetorical scholar. He is not necessarily considered a rhetorical scholar. He is a literary analysis, definitely in the area of English and English literature and things of that nature. He is one of the first noteworthy scholars within the area of media analysis, but his area of expertise was mass communication in English. We don't consider him from a communication perspective, a communication rhetorician. And so that's important to know. He coined the phrases the global village and the medium is the message in the 1960s, which you'll find as you're going through the reading this week and as you watch this lecture in the next couple minutes. That's very profound. To take the technologies we had from a communication perspective in the 1960s and say that we live in a global village and that the medium is the message is very profound statements considering where we are today with technology. He, like I said, was always fascinated with new technologies. Within reference to his term, the medium is the message, and the text he wrote on that is that McLuhan constantly and consistently argued that we need to look at the mediums we are using to communicate, not necessarily the message we are communicating. That we as humans communicate similar messages across times and across generations through all the time. Mothers and daughters have very similar messages to communicate as a mother is raising a daughter throughout that are multi-generational, that transcends generations. There's always things that are going on in that mother-daughter relationship that will happen no matter what, regardless of the time frame which they live in. And so what McLuhan would say is that as in form of a communication technology, the communication technology device itself is worth analyzing and considering this medium rather than the messages I'm saying utilizing this medium. And so that's where the profound nature of what he was saying is. He coined this phrase in the 1960s when television was very popular and the telephone were primary forms of communication, that he said we need to consider the medium in which we're using to communicate rather than the messages that we're sending through those mediums. Why? Because those messages stay the same. We're always going to have in a professorial and student relationship certain questions you're going to need to ask me. If it were in the 1940s and 50s versus today, the student is always going to have some classic staple questions to ask the professor that are going to transcend time. However, the mediums we're using to say this now speaks more to the times today than it did in anything else. Why? Because in the 60s and 70s, you would have to line up outside my office and wait for me and come to me during my office hours. You couldn't send me an email from your smartphone or computer and reach me at any point of the day that I can respond to and respond back quickly or instantly. You also couldn't reach me on a telephone necessarily at an easy time to get a hold of me. And so what McLuhan is saying is that we need to look at the mediums we're using and what these mediums are and what these communications are and what they speak to our society and the impact and influence they have on our society rather than what we're actually saying. The fact that we rely more on these today than we have in any other point in time in our history, and the fact that these are little computers in our pocket, if they can fit in our pocket, is far more profound than anything else we have to say with these. It's more important to look at how we're using these to communicate than what we're actually saying with these things. In fact, this is very impactful and influential within society. So if you think about rhetoric and everything we've learned this semester, looking at rhetorical analyses and criticisms and what these particular things are saying to one another, what we're communicating in these particular modes of communication, if we consider the medium, what does that say when we're using our rhetorical messages? What does that say when we're sending out and critiquing these types of communication artifacts? What role does the medium play within that? And that might be something you want to include in your theorist critical assignment paper or within your written rhetorical analyses now that you have the time to include that. The next thing McLuhan noted was the global village, and he specifically coined this phrase in 1962, and he theorized, really, it was a formalized a prediction within a theory, was that within the new age of electronic communication, mind you, this was the 60s, television, radio, and phone had shrunk the world to the size of a village, that we were no longer this global enterprise, but rather we lived in a village amongst one another, and that a small village would allow for instant communications, whereas a global world or international thinking would not. This impacts our society in many profound ways, especially today. He would say that this has even increased or has been more profound in how we communicate today. I can reach somebody today that is next door to me, in the office next door to me, through this device. I can reach my husband at home with this device. I can reach a friend in Australia with this device. And this device brings us together globally, yes, but in a village sense. It allows for instant communication that transcends location, and that's what's very important. And so that's what McLuhan was getting into when he talked about the global village. That's also what the text alludes to when it talks about the double-edged sword with the medium. It creates this global village. It brings us together in many ways, but also creates an information glut or information overload, so that we are closer together and more closely connected, but we are also oversaturated now with information, and the discernment and ability to critical think and analyze this information has lessened because we are sometimes overloaded with this information. It doesn't allow to give us the time to actually do that. So these are some things to keep in mind as we're moving through the course text this week, as we are looking at items within the course and considering the role that media plays within rhetorical analysis. Additionally, just keep in mind, like I said, we're reading chapter 13. We're watching the 2 videos listed there, and then we're also working on weekly review number 7 and our written rhetorical analyses. If you have any questions, let me know early on in the week. And like I said, do be mindful of the week 8 deadlines. Those deadlines are different and they're not the same as any other week that we've had. So you will want to keep those in mind because they will be coming up quickly. I pray you all have a blessed week and I look forward to interacting with you online.